Welcome everyone to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the advertising person with HGA, and I get to be your host today. Today, we are excited to be sponsored by the wonderful people at the Western North Carolina Fiber and Handweavers Guild. What a great guild. We appreciate them so much for sponsoring our speaker today, which happens to be Liz Spear. If you have questions for Liz, don't forget, put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. I can't see them in the chat, but we'll love to have those comments in the chat. Keep those coming, but put your questions in the Q&A, please. Liz has been a full-time craftsperson in Western North Carolina since 95, sorry. She is primarily a weaver of cloth and a maker of fine garments and accessories. For several years, Liz has also been making nuno-felt yardage that is cut up and combined with handwoven fabrics to make exhibit-worthy garments. Wow. Teaching and demonstrating for craft schools and organizations are an important part of her continuing to master her craft. She conducts workshops in both nuno-felting and sewing your handmade fabrics, an incredible workshop that you're going to hear more about later, and concentration on garment design and sewing. Liz is a member of several fine craft guilds and has taught at Penland, at Arrowmont, John C. Campbell, and the Appalachian Center for Craft, as well as presenting workshops for weaving and fiber guilds across the country. Hey, Liz, welcome.
Am I there?
The only Liz.
Am I there?
You're there, girl. You're there.
All righty.
Great to have you here.
Thanks, Kathy.
First question is, what is your favorite tea?
Well, ordinarily, I drink in this very mug decaf, English breakfast tea in the afternoon and evenings. However, as one might imagine from my voice, I have a head cold, so throat coat. Blech. And I have water handy too.
I'm sorry you're a little under the weather. We appreciate you coming anyway and being with us today. It's Absolutely. Good to have you.
Thank you.
And cough away however much you need to.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started in fiber. You have quite the journey.
Well, my family were all makers. We all made stuff. We all made do. We fixed things. We figured out how to make things that would be exactly what we wanted, whether it was sewing or building equipment or remodeling the house or remodeling camping vehicles. And we were all Girl Scouts, frankly. And think of all of those badges and opportunities to learn yet another fibrous thing. And so all of that, we all make stuff. We all make stuff. And when I went to college, I started, well, the same quarter, which was my second year, I took both beginning clay and beginning weaving. And clay, I already knew I loved a lot. But weaving, oh my God, the loom, the tools, the fibers, it was an instant click. I really, really liked it a lot. And it made my brain speed around trying to figure out how to get that machine and those tools to do stuff, whether it was decorative or kind of impossible. It didn't matter. I just really loved it. So all the way through school, through college, I continued both weaving and clay. And it wasn't until the very last quarter when I had to declare the BFA topic, fall of 77, that I chose clay because I have a very specific direction in clay. I'm a thrower. I make functional pots. And at that point, I was kind of taken in by a group of advanced students who were all beginning their own businesses. And I realized early on that you really have to focus in order to do this for a living. And I pretty much never turned back. In fiber, as much as I loved all of the various processes, I didn't really have a focus. Which didn't mean that when I went to work as a potter that I just totally quit cold turkey. I started buying looms and had lots of yarn and wove some rag rugs along the way. Beginning of the journey.
Well, then you were a potter. I'm not sure I got this timeline right. You were primarily a potter for like 12 years, right? And then
Yep, 13.
And I always find it's interesting because I've interviewed several people who either were potters and then switched to weaving, or they did both, like you did. So what do you think is the connection between pottery and weaving? Why do you think it applies to both artists?
It's the most malleable of the materials. Think about that.
Yeah.
Other materials may seem malleable when you think about it. Glass is incredibly malleable, molten form, but you can't touch it with your hands. It requires tools, requires a great deal of heat. Even pottery, my favorite part was the very beginning, clay in my hands. And it required a kiln. It was the final arbiter as far as color and often form. But that's something I figured out kind of along the way. Why those two large areas in particular really appealed to me.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Well, I thought it was interesting when I was reading your kind of life story, and it said that you were 12 years, you're in Iowa doing the pottery, and then you decide, and I know I'm kind of slimming this down. It was much more complicated than this, but you kind of change directions. You pursue weaving, and that takes you to North Carolina. When I think about that, it just sounds so brave and a leap of faith. I mean, how did you do that? I mean, most people, I would be too scared to do that. So how did that happen for you?
Well, I got came to the realization that I really needed to change something there in Iowa. We did many, 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 many craft fairs. And I would, staffing the booth, I would answer the same questions over and over and over. And for many years, that was just fine. But long about 90, 91, I realized I couldn't sound sincere to save my life. And it was time to move on because it bothered me, So I thought about it and I planned for most of a year, wrote a lot of postcards to friends and family across the country, whom I mostly didn't get to see very frequently. Scary's relative. Also, I was single and I'm still single. So my decisions were not going to affect anyone else terribly except myself. That makes a big difference, making those decisions. And frankly, I don't consider it a change of direction. I consider it a change of medium. The direction has pretty much continued straight through, to my mind. When I hit Haywood Community College, which became my goal, ultimately, I considered it my graduate school, frankly. And a part of the program is figuring these kinds of things out. Why one makes those kinds of decisions about what to make and how to make it and how to market it, how to sell it, how to continue going on. Part of the program is exposing students to a whole variety of options and possibilities. And because I had already been in a large clay studio, following a number of specific, losing words already, a number of specific decisions, I was able to pick out the pieces that I was going to be able to apply to my business and my life, doing craft fairs. I was pretty good at it. And so I chose to make that a part of my business as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was an art major in college, and I took a pottery class, ceramics, whatever they called it then. And I remember my instructor at the time said, and I probably have the time wrong, but he basically said, if you can't knock out a pot every X minutes, he goes, you're not going to make it. And that was an eye-opening for, the art major who was like into the, aesthetics of the art. And here was a guy who going, now here's the real world about, if you want to make this and sell and make a living at it. So
yeah,
it was amazing. It was kind of an eye-opener for me. So the other thing I thought was interesting is that a lot of people I've interviewed that they came to weaving later in life, or they pursued being a full-time artist after they retired, or they just kind of accidentally fell into it. But you really seemed to pursue it just like anybody pursues a career or a life, whether it's being an engineer or a doctor or whatever. It was so impressive hearing you talk, and even now hearing you talk about what you did to get where you are now, and that there was a plan and you went after that.
Well, not to burst your bubble, darling, but there was no plan. Not really.
Next question. It
really
appears that way. You look good.
Well, I'm a Gemini, and an eldest child besides. So the thing is, the determination started in high school that I was going to be an art major. And I didn't care about exactly how I was going to make a living, to the, not delirium, but the sadness on the part of my parents. But they figured if I didn't know, I would learn. And so they supported me. And again, it didn't occur to me that I would end up making pots for a living and then turn around, change parts of the country, and make clothing for a living. Look at me. This is kind of dressed up. This is my newest denim shirt.
Thank you.
This is how I dress.
Appreciate it.
You're very welcome, hon. There really isn't a plan. Wasn't a plan. I am of the nature that waits until something kind of comes along, or I see something going by and am inspired, or think, yeah, I'm going to take this opportunity. Yeah. And looking at the rest of your questions, we'll run into more of those opportunities.
Well, I guess I was thinking about your choice of Haywood, because it's not just an art school. You don't go there just to learn how to weave. You go there to learn how to make it your business.
Yeah.
And that seems like, I don't know if that's why you went there, but it sure did. That does match your kind of philosophy in life.
Oh, absolutely. And in 91, when I was kind of preparing to leave Iowa and the pottery, I identified 2 schools to check out. I respond well to school. I like that direction. Oh my goodness, look at that, a whole building full of opportunities to glom onto. The Haywood was one of them. There was a teeny tiny little black and white ad in the back of Handmade magazine, Handwoven, pardon me. And it was the only one like that I had seen that had practical application. Learn to have a craft business. The other school I chose to check out was Oregon School of Arts and Crafts out in Portland. And I have family in Portland, Oregon. And in 92, when I traveled 9 months, 3 corners of the country, actually all 4, with a loom and the cat in my truck, then I kind of knew by May when I hit Utah that I was going to go to Haywood. I interviewed with Catherine Ellis in during their spring break. I believe it was early April that year, and pretty much knew several hundred, 1,000 miles later, that's what I was going to do. And so made my way up to Seattle and all the way back. And by the end of August, I was here looking for a place to live, registering to school. And it's that, Kathy, it's the practical application. You don't have to make a living doing what we do in just one way. And that's the beauty of that program, is helping people figure out what tools they've already got and how they can apply them to their own benefit.
That's an excellent way of describing that program. That's an excellent way. Well, here's, we haven't looked much at your work, right? Let's start looking at your work now. Here's a piece of your work. Is in the middle of design. It's not even finished yet. But so how do you design? I mean, do you draw it all out ahead of time? Do you use a computer? You draw it out by hand, kind of wing it?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, next question.
Yeah. I wrote a whole big answer.
Oh, good.
So color play is huge, and I know we'll come back to that later. But when I'm doing a garment, and the garment that you're looking at is very specific garment, that was the winner from Convergence Fashion Show. I can't even recognize which seam it is that I'm making right there. But, oh yes, I can. In that particular instance, there was a theme. And I often don't deal with a theme. The theme is often just colors that I want to use together. Whether it's strictly my hand woven, or my hand woven and someone else's fabric. In this instance, it was felt, nuno-felt, that I specifically made for that project. But most of the time, no, it's joy in color play, because each one of my twill warps, I weave about half of it in 2/2 twill. And the other half I weave in various block twills orientation. I weave twills because I make garments. Since the ABL came into the studio, it's threaded to the same basic block twill, just expanded to 4 blocks. And patterns and weaving habits kind of bounce back and forth between the AVL and the shacked floor loom, which is the basic loom that I use. The ABL gets one very long warp on it every year, and the shacked will do 7 or 8 warps, a different colorway. And I vary the wefts in weight and color to give myself a whole variety of fabrics with every warp. And the thing is, I'm not designing new stuff. I mean, sort of new combinations perhaps, but I've been weaving these same or very similar fabrics since the mid-90s. Okay, I don't rethread my loom. My familiarity with my fabrics and also with the garment patterns, they guide me. This particular coat is about the 7th iteration of the coat that I designed while I was assisting at Penland in 1994. Yeah, it's pretty fun to look back where these things have come from. But because I was familiar with the basic lines and then changed them to other similar lines, but gave myself 3 or 4 new and different necklines or neckline treatments, that gave me new garments. There you go.
So the creativity is trying to take the basics and change it in some way, right?
Well, that's what it is for me. And it's more efficient than starting from scratch every time. And when I need a boost of, difference, I'm jonesing for a different structure or a different, this or that, different color range, different color choices, different materials. That's where the collaborations come in, which is your next question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It is the next question.
I know.
You're psychic. It's amazing. Because I love it that on your website, there's a whole section called Liz and Friends.
Yeah.
It's like a talk show. And so you do a lot of collaborations, and it's great to see some of these. And we have several images that we're going to show here that you have done with other fiber artists. So what is, you talked about kind of the creativity comes in. What's the other attraction of working with other artists? Because I know some people are like, no way, I'm not doing it. I hate working with other people.
Well, the thing is, I use the term collaborations most likely differently than it is defined by others. I do not invite people into the studio, okay? I take in their materials, their fabrics, their special project. And we talk about it. If they've got an idea, if it's just like, oh, whatever you want to do, Liz, I'll just be happy, whether it's for themselves or for garments that will go into inventory. So, and I don't think I've ever had anybody come back and say, oh no, I hate it. I just hate it. The gal on the left in that wonderful white coat is Cherry Craddy, who modeled for us for a number of years. And that particular coat is hers. We met, she asked me if I would be willing to make a coat for her out of her handmade paper for her to wear to her son's wedding. So those panels are her handmade paper. The white parts are actually hand woven with bamboo warp and linen paper weft.
Wow. And
it was a very fun project. The cool thing is that the practice garment that I made to make sure that, sewing with paper was falling within my skill set or wasn't going to push me too far. I still have the practice piece, and it actually has become more of a true collaboration. I pass it around to buddies. And they add some embroidery, maybe add a little extra fabric here or there, maybe draw on it a little bit. It's very fun. I think it's in, tag. I'm it for right now. I'll pass it on. The coat on the right, that was looking at a pile of fabrics that I had in the studio. There are actually 5 Weavers fabrics in this coat. 4 of us, 3 of us. 3 of us were Haywood students at various times. Catherine Ellis fabric is in that coat. And there was another woman whose name I forget right this second. And so 5 Weavers coat. This piece sold at Convergence in Albuquerque, where I'm sure it's having a really good life.
Somebody watching is going to say, there's my coat.
Maybe. So the piece on the left is a very sweet piece. Murray Johnston was a fractured landscape quilter from Birmingham, Alabama. And she was one of the first of my major collaborators. Just a sweetheart. And so in 2016, I did an exhibition making specific garments with 8 people who were members of the same organization. And Murray said, of course, she'd love to do it. So I sent her 2 of the pattern pieces, the front and the back, joined at the shoulder. And she said she just got shivers when she unpacked that pack of pattern paper, because she had just been thinking about having her trees meet at a shoulder over a garment, which is very cool. And of course, the blue and white jacket, we made that for Convergence in Milwaukee in 2016, when Catherine was she was teaching and invited to bring or send 4 or 5 garments for the fashion show. And this is what she brought them. She brought a bunch of fabric to me and gave me carte blanche to just do whatever I wanted, which was so cool. And there it is. Very happy jacket, which now lives in Cleveland, by the way.
It's so Catherine. I mean, you
Yeah.
could just, it screams out her name. And if y'all aren't familiar with Catherine
And
Ellis, if you go look her
and
up, you'll see exactly, this is Catherine.
And this is old fabric. This is something she did early on, and it was a tablecloth that she used for years before she retired it. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was curious about, do you have to, and this is from someone who doesn't do sewing much at all or any kind of collaboration, but do you give them like a specific specs, like it has to be this thick, it can't be made out of 5/2, it has to be made out of 8/2, or it has to be so many inches wide, or you just kind of go with the flow?
I go with the flow. You know, I figure that's up to me. That's part of that challenge, the creative challenge.
It is creative.
And yeah, and the thickest things have been the quilted stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I make sure that I've got my heavier fabrics available in a variety of colors, because that's, I I rarely weave for specific garments. A little bit more now that I'm doing the big coats, but the vast majority of the time, no, I'm just weaving.
So you make the yardage and then later it will tell you what it wants to be.
Something like that. When the right collaborative piece of fabric comes within the right distance.
They're like magnets.
That's it.
Okay. Well, you have a wonderful color sense. And even though you're not making all the different pieces, you have a wonderful way of putting the right piece with the right piece color-wise, as well as otherwise. So what is your color philosophy? How did you get to the point where you were able to make these choices that work so well? Color is such a mystery, so to some people, a lot of people. How did that happen for you that you're able to do this so well?
Kathy,
What?
Practice.
I knew you were going to say that.
Practice. It is. Color's important to me. Color is as important as that fiber in my hands. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The as I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, but in ceramics, the kiln is the final arbiter of color. And that's one of the things that kept me coming back to fiber, was playing with the color.
Do you do dyeing?
I'm sorry?
Do you do dyeing? Do you dye
No.
your yarn?
No, that's something that I learned like when I was still at Haywood.
Mm-hmm.
I was already, as I was realizing that A, I was going to make yardage, and B, I was going to cut and sew it into garments. I love dyeing. I had a great time, but I realized early on that I would have neither the space nor the time to dye at the scale that I found myself choosing to work. You know, 24-yard warp in those years was a short one.
Oh.
And yeah, just the sheer quantity.
Oh my gosh.
And the time. So that was one of the things that led me to ask Neil Howard to share my craft fair booth, because she is an incredible dyer, and that brought, and making different things than mine. So that brought the look of hand dyed work into the booth. Anymore, I tend to, so as the nuno-felt has developed over the last 10, 12 years, I find myself doing more dyeing and pattern making on the silks that I use to make the nuno-felt. And that's satisfying enough.
Well, I want to talk more about that, but I want to jump back to a question about color again. When you were in school, do you think that dyeing helped you understand color combinations better, or do you think it really impacted on your color choices? Or are you going to go back to that horrible answer of, practice?
Art major, That's it, honey. Art major. I had color theory. I don't know how many times.
Yeah, me too.
And, you know, and what was interesting in having the dyeing class at Haywood was working with, I believe, 3 different dye systems, maybe 4, over the course of that quarter, and and they were all, no, three of the 4 were chemical dyes, and understanding how the different palettes of those dyes worked differently than the classic Roy G. Biv that I was used to. But that's it. It was all play.
I like play better than practice. I'll keep that in mind.
Consider it synonymous,
There you
Kathy.
go. There you go. It's all how you frame it. It's the spin.
Yep.
Well, how did you go into felting from weaving?
Well, when you teach at John C. Campbell Folk School, one is handed a check for not a whole lot, but they're working on it. In addition, you are given an instructor's resource, which basically is a ticket to take a class of the same length for almost free. So over the 9, I'm not real sure how many times I've taught there, 9 or 10 times. I've taken 8 or 9 classes there that I would not ordinarily be able to. Somebody jumped ahead. So most of the classes that I took were with the idea of it contributing to the business. But the only one that really stuck was the felting. And I really loved the felting. By the time I took a felting class, and the first one was with Lisa Klakulik.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Sort of a survey class. I really liked it a lot. So when a class taught by Linda Veillot came along in, I think it was January of 10, I took that class. It was a seamless garment class. And doing seamless garments in felting is a whole school of thought and process. And I kind of lucked out in that my project utterly failed the first day. Oh, yeah. And that left me free to try other things. So at the time, well, Linda also came at this felting thing from being a couturier seamstress.
Wow.
And in addition to these seamless garments, she also did felted yardage. Bingo, big idea, had the brain fart to make large pieces of felt, cut them up, and combine them with my handwoven. And so that was absolutely where that came from. And so I make 2 to 4 pieces of felt, kind of on average of a year, at a friend's studio, not here. And it makes me very happy. That feeds that same kind of set of design needs that working collaboratively does. A different kind of fabric, other color choices, because that felt is a little bit closer to the ceramics in the kiln, because I never know for sure what that felt is going to end up looking like, because those 3 translucent layers end up mingling and changing the colors on the outer surface. So there you go.
When you were talking, I thought about how in some ways that could be kind of a freeing a feeling of I'm just going to make this and someday it'll be something, not like, oh my gosh, I got to make this into something. And I ask people who do a lot of they do their fiber for a business. Do you have to make that choice of, I really would like to make it this way, but I'm going to make it this way because I got to sell it. So it sounds like you don't have that issue the way you do it. No, yes.
I try not to. But freeing is very much a word that I use in these processes, because particularly with the nuno-felt, while it looks really gorgeous laid out on that table, I am free from worrying about whether or not I should have put that piece of silk there or over here, or whether I end up with wavy edges, because by golly, I'm going to cut it all up to sew
Oh,
into
right.
the garments. So it takes the stress of making a single thing out.
That's great. That's great.
Mhm.
Something to think about. That's interesting. Now you are a teacher. You are a well sought after teacher, and we'll talk more about that of where you're going next in teaching in a few minutes. But what is it about teaching that attracts you? Because it
I always
can't be that, it's just for the money, because you're so good at it. People who just do it for the money are okay. You're really good at it.
Thank you, Kathy.
Mhm.
I never planned to be a teacher. I don't have any
Really?
training. I don't have any training. The I always call it Catherine's fault. She's the one who sent me to Penland to assist a couple of times, 93 and 94. And in 96, she was called to asked if she would teach beginning weaving at the end of the summer. And she said, no, I'm booked. Call Liz.
Ooh.
I know. So I was scared spitless.
Say no
I had
pressure there.
12.
Following
No
in
pressure.
Catherine
Oh my
Ellis's
God.
footsteps. Yeah.
But it was only a week. It was only a week, and I could be on. I could be enthusiastic and supportive, and I could make it for a week. Now, the following year, I assisted Edwina Bringle for a 2-week course, and she taught me how to pace that.
Uh-huh.
That was pretty huge. So these pictures that you see on your screen, the one on the left, Katie, what a
Hi,
hun.
Katie.
She was a part of the Atlanta Weaving Guild's sewing workshop several years ago. And the shot on the right was just last April. I was out in Colorado for another three workshop swing through. And there I'm just talking about different pieces, parts, things that I've added to the various patterns over the years. I will say one thing that's kind of a design feature, ongoing, because it happens over and over and over again. But new design ideas happen the vast majority of the time in my garments because I've run out of fabric. Okay.
Really?
Yes,
I
because
love
I run
that.
out of fabric. And that's one of the things that I know I'm good at with teaching. I'm very good at having those facilitating ideas for students when they run into problems or haven't quite figured something out yet. I'm good at having ideas for other people too. And that's what I like about the teaching. When someone's little face lights up, when they have that aha moment because their hem now hangs straight, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I didn't know that was possible.
It is possible, Kathy.
I should take your class.
I think so.
Now, I don't know if you've decided to answer this question or not. Yeah, I got an ambivalent feeling when we talked about it earlier. So if you could go back, because you have just been through so many changes in your life, different places. And if you could go back to a younger Liz, like before you left college, or maybe before you went to college, I don't know, and you could talk to her, what would you say to her?
I don't know that she would particularly understand it.
Oh, I get that. That's
okay,
true.
right?
Yeah, right.
The youth of America, where are they going? Oh my goodness. So 2 things: practice, 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 obviously, paying attention, and another phrase that I gathered from an engineer friend: prior planning prevents piss poor performance. Learn about planning. and how valuable it is. Whether it's planning exactly where you're going, or planning to provide yourself with options, be open. Okay.
Mhm.
Long about 2008, when we had that last recession,
Oh.
I realized at craft fairs that the sales of my main garment had slowed down. That July and October both, I realized that instead of selling 4 more pieces, I had ladies coming back, bringing the garments they had purchased before, asking for an alteration. They wanted exactly what they wanted. They wanted to continue to wear them, but they just weren't willing to buy another. That was pretty interesting. So that, combined with just realizing that sales had kind of fallen off. I don't think it was all the recession. I think it was just that I hadn't made a whole lot of changes to my garments. It wasn't enough for some ladies to hear, oh, but I have this new color combination. That wasn't enough. So I had a major design change in my unlined shirts, and found that I was purposefully, consciously being open to whatever might come along, and brought in a few new designs. And that started sort of the last series of new garments based on that original 1994 jacket. Yeah, being open, possibilities, paying attention, prior planning. That's what I say.
Definitely the open. That's really worked for you. So what's next for you?
Well, let's see. Short term, I get to stay home for a couple months. I have a demo at the Folk Art Center in Asheville in May, immediately followed by 2 weeks at my friend Sally's making felt.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then the aforementioned, there will be a 2-day sewing workshop in Hendersonville for my sponsoring guild. Thank you, ladies. And then shows. Got a show, got an exhibition to make a special coat for. That'll be interesting. A different theme that I will use as an opportunity to do something I haven't allowed myself to do before. Take time to embellish a coat rather than rely on a friend's embroidery or dyeing.
Can you tell us what that conference is so we can look for it?
Which conference?
You said the one that's coming up that you're doing the exhibit for. Or am I combining two things?
It's an exhibition. It's a members exhibition for the Southern Highlands Guild.
Oh, okay. Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if somebody wants to see what you're up to, is all this information on your website?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Yes, it is.
And we've put that in chat. We've put your website, and then we'll talk about your website again at the end. But we have lots of questions. So why don't we jump over here to questions? All right. Some of these, I don't know what they mean. Oh, I get it. All right. Colleen East said, looms and spinning wheels tend to multiply. And I guess she's referring back to, you said you were gathering up looms. And she's true. It's true. They're like rabbits. All of a sudden you have 3 and then you have 4. So,
yep.
Some of these we've already answered as we've talked. Sorry, I'm going through these really quickly.
That's all right.
This is from Pamela Rumney. Do you feel that the way you come at fiber displays something about the clay and glazes?
No.
Okay. I'm not sure what I may not be asking that right.
Although there are some traditional glazes that I'm still sort of inspired by, but generally actually, there was a chunk of nuno-felt that I made
Uh-huh.
that I did think of some of those traditional Japanese glazes. Nice question. Thank you.
Good.
See? Inspiration
There you
from a
go.
question.
Jane Kaplan wants to know, she says, love your work. And she wants to know, what patterns do you use? Do you use like store-bought, make up your own pattern?
Yes. I use a variety of patterns.
Okay.
As I mentioned, more than half of my garment line is derived from one jacket designed back in '94.
Mm-hmm.
I made a fingertip length jacket, and then I made several unlined shirts using the same style lines, and that evolved, to short jackets, pea coats. Now the latest iteration has been long coats, and of course I made those short again as well. There is a butterick pattern from the '70s that I found in my stash, and it's been a shirt that I worked on at that time at Penland in '94, and I made changes. I changed the collar, I added cuffs, I changed the back pattern just to fit my fabrics a little bit better. I use a couple of commercial patterns from small pattern companies, one in particular from Sewing Workshop. Back in, boy, was it our first one? One of the convergences, 04 or 06, my buddy Neil and I were vendors, and we were back to back. It was 04, Denver. So we were back to back with Linda Lee, whose pattern company is the Sewing Workshop. She was trying it for the first time, and she had a whole rack of really, really gorgeous samples of her garments. And Neil had recently changed her fabric, decided that she wanted to go into garments. So we were sort of on the lookout for patterns, for ideas, for garments for Neil's fabrics, because there's so much more to them. There's silk, they're woven shibori, they're just lots more stuff going on, but they needed to be simple garments. And so we took the one shirt we had with us to Linda and asked her what she thought, and pardon me, if she thought any of her patterns might be a good fit for this kind of fabric. And she invited us to page through, try things on, just see what we thought. And we came up with a couple of them that we got. And I said, now, Linda, you realize we're like small production people, and we're going to make multiples of this and sell it. Is that a problem for you? And she said, girls, Midwesterner, after my own heart, girls make a million. She considers her patterns to be a really good beginning for folks to use. So I have seen some commercial patterns that very specifically say, do not, you are infringing on my rights. Do not use this for anything other than personal work. That's fine. There's lots of patterns.
Now, what is Linda's last name?
Linda Lee, L-E-E.
Okay, because I know people are going to ask.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The Sewing Workshop. She's based in Tulsa. She has a blog. She's got very active online presence.
And her patterns are good for handwoven?
Some of them are.
Okay.
Yep, some of them are. Of course, the one that we use the most is no longer available, but you never know what you're going to find on eBay.
All right, here's from Berna Lowenstein. She says, I have a gorgeous Liz Spear, Catherine Ellis, Neil Howard coat that I bought at Convergence. I wonder if it was the one we were talking about.
Well, it might have been. Ask her if this is in Albuquerque.
Was this in Albuquerque? Bernie, you have to come back in and tell us whether or not it was Albuquerque. She said, I always get a ton of compliments when I wear it. and I'm not sure what the question is. You may understand this better than me. Do you interface the fabrics before or after piecing them with
I
which
interface.
products?
I totally get it. This is part of my sewing workshop. I go ahead and I
I
interface
need to
those.
take this.
I interface the small pieces before I sew them together. I've done both. Early on, I tried different things, but if you interface after, then it's a more unsightly lump, shall we say, if you have those two seam allowances under the interfacing. But if you interface the individual pieces and then sew them together, you've got a more smooth outer surface.
Okay, so when you're talking about interfacing, you're talking about lining?
No.
Okay.
Fusible interfacing.
Oh, fusible. Okay.
Yes.
Well, the reason why I was confused is because further down we have another question, which is about the felting. And this person wanted to know, do you use the felting all by itself, or do you put the felting on top of cloth?
Okay. So, no, the felted fabric is stitched to the handwoven. It is not on top. It overlaps some.
Right.
And those garments, the fusible, it is a lighter weight fusible, a weft insertion fusible, which has a little bit more drape to it. That is put across an entire piece.
Okay.
On those that where I've combined the felt when it's a lined garment. When it's an unlined garment, no, the felt is still standing alone. It's a separate piece that is sewn in.
That was from Mimi Anderson. Mimi, I hope I answered that or asked that question correctly. So,
anytime. Sorry, I'm reading names.
I'm going to save your chat so you can see everybody who's said hey. Okay.
Oh, good.
Ruth Howell, there's Ruth. She said, you are the best. I always send my students to watch you weave at SAF, and your weaving looks like it's choreographed. Now, let me explain this. At the Southeast Animal Fiber Fair, which is outside of Asheville every October. If y'all are in the area, go to it. It is a hoot. But a mainstay of it is Liz at this humongous loom that she hauls in, bless her pumpkin heart, and she sits there and weaves the whole weekend, and it's just fascinating. And as HTA, I usually get to stand beside her with my booth, and it's wonderful. And you are very good at answering questions, because I've heard some of them, and they everything from someone who knows what they're talking about to, is that knitting? I always like that question.
Oh, yeah.
Is that knitting? No.
Yes.
But if you ever do go to SAF, go see Liz weave. It's mesmerizing to just stand there and watch her do it. So thank you, Ruth Howell, because Ruth is responsible for you going to Western North Carolina to teach, correct?
Yep.
Way to go, Ruth. Alan Shumanko. Here's a silly question. I had a dream about combining day and woven fabric. I don't know what that means. I can't get that wisp of a memory out of my mind. Have you ever been able to combine the two? I don't mean by adding, clay, not day, clay. By adding a clay button, but making each integral to the other. Yeah, do you ever use clay
No.
Okay. Sorry, Alan. You're gonna have to do that one on your own and let Liz know about it.
Well, and I've tried. I've done some clay button. When I was at Haywood, I did clay buttons, I did wooden buttons, and I just was not completely satisfied as much fun as I was having. And back in college, I had an instructor who sort of made that assignment to me for an entire quarter. And it was not a satisfying experience at all. So it could be that I've been dragging my friggin' feet with, Cherry, very good.
That's wonderful.
Yes. So, no, so have at it. Show me what you do.
we're going to hold you to that. We want to see those, Alan. You got to come back with those. We want to see them. A couple of people have asked this. Deb loosely wants to know, which discontinued pattern did you use from the sewing workshop? Do you remember what the name of it was or anything?
The plaza jacket.
Plaza jacket. Okay.
Yep. And the trio top. The plaza jacket is the one that we used for Neil's Fabrics, and the plaza Neil's Fabrics. The trio top is the one that we used, or I used, for my garments. And it's been reissued, but without that third piece, the topper.
Mm. All right. Oh, and Berna says she doesn't remember which convergence it was. It might have been Atlanta. Were you at Atlanta, Liz?
No.
I bet it was.
Atlanta was 98, right?
Yep.
Nope.
Thank you, Berna. Appreciate you answering.
Thank you.
So many questions.
Cool.
Oh, here we go. Oh, Joanne Katsos. Just met you last week at John C. Campbell. Wow. Didn't know you were famous.
Is right.
Doggone it. Joanne, you could have got her autograph and everything.
We will meet again, Joe. No question.
Oh, here we go. Kathy Roy. Just a big hi and a hug from Ohio. She says she misses you. And that wearing the jacket, it feels like she's getting a big hug from you. Oh, or keeps you close. There you go. Well, I can't believe it, but I think we're going to have to stop here soon. Thank you so much for being on here today.
Thanks for having me, Kathy.
I love sitting next to you at SAF. I look forward to seeing you there again. And again, I encourage people to go by and see her if you're there. If you want to see more of what Liz does, and you do, go to lizspearhandwoven.com. And can people send emails through your website?
Yes.
Because there was a lot of questions we didn't get to today, and I'm sorry. And a lot of them were how-to questions, which you may have better luck with doing through email rather than trying to do it today. So if you have questions, please go to her website and email her. And I'm sure she'll be glad to help you out any way she can, or come up to Hendersonville, North Carolina, and come to the workshop. Oh, back to this. Sorry, I'm sending people to your workshop. I forgot what I was doing here. I do want to thank Western North Carolina Fiber and Handweavers Guild. They're a wonderful guild up near Asheville, kind of outside of Asheville, south of Asheville. And they are going to be hosting Liz in a workshop if you're interested. This is a beautiful time of year to be up in the mountains, so you might want to check that out. And again, thank you for sponsoring this episode of Textiles and Tea. This is a great little guild. They do a lot. So thank you so much. If you would like to be a sponsor, or your guild or your business, please go to our website at weavespindye.org, and you can sign up to sponsor an episode of Textiles and Tea, and we would appreciate it. Guess what? Convergence is coming. It's going to be in Wichita, Kansas, July the 11th through the 17th, 2024. Not this summer, next summer, but leader proposals is open. The deadline's coming up, though. Please go online and submit your mini classes you would like to teach at Convergence. Send them all that you think you might want to teach, and let the committee decide. People keep calling me and saying, well, should I do this one or this one? Submit them both, because you never know if the committee's looking for a 3-day workshop or a 3-hour workshop. So submit those and get those in before the deadline hits. And also, if you would like to be a volunteer, we are always needing volunteers, everything from the planning committees to, there on the Convergence, helping in the exhibits or helping in the vendor hall. There's lots of ways that you can be more part of Convergence instead of just attending. We'd love to have your help. We will have, we got Careers in Textile Symposium, which is March the 24th through the 25th. It is a great program. You can learn a lot about, kind of like what Liz was going through, trying to decide, how can I make a living in this with fiber arts? And these folks are going to tell you how. It's a variety of people from independent businesses, artists, everything. And they're going to talk about careers in the fiber world. And I encourage you all to check it out and look at this. You can sign up at weavespindye.org. They're going to share about their experiences. They're going to provide insights into the diverse and changing landscape of textiles and the fiber arts. It's open to all. Anybody can attend. It's geared a lot toward young professionals, graduates, and students. But if you are looking for a change in your life and this is what you might want to do, come join us. The registration is free for students and for the HGA members. And if you're not a member, it's $20 for a non-member. So please come online, sign up. It's an incredible 2 days of information, and it will be recorded. And if you've signed up, you can watch it again later. I want to thank everybody for their support of HGA, either through your donations or your memberships. The donations that you made and the sponsorships, being a sponsor for Textiles Tea or sponsoring something at Convergence or at the Spinning and Weaving Week, all the event we have, those are the things that keep the program going. If you like new programming that we've been adding over the last 2 or 3 years, that's how we are able to keep that going. So thank you for everyone who's been donating through either joining, donating to Fiber Trust, being a sponsor. All of that keeps the program going and moving, and we can add more. If you've missed an episode, you want to watch this episode again today, you want to share it with a friend, you can do that on the HGA Facebook page, or you can see it on YouTube. It takes us a little while to get the YouTube up, and I encourage you to subscribe, because when you do, you'll get a notice saying a new episode has been uploaded. So check that out at HGA Facebook or HGA YouTube. Thank you so much for being here this week. Thank you, Liz. What a lovely afternoon with her. Next week, we have Pat Hiltz. I will not be here. We will have a guest. Melvina is coming on, and she's going to be our guest host next week. And I think you're really going to enjoy that episode. Have a wonderful week and happy tea.